Hello, and welcome back to US History and Elections. It is currently the 30th of October, and we are 6 days away from Election Day. Now, there's so much going on at the moment. Over 50 million people have already voted, and that was we're about a third of the way through the 2020 presidential vote margin already. We still got another 6 days left of early voting, whether that be mail-in, whether that be early in person, and then we've got Election Day. And of course, the focus is that people have been focusing on the presidential race because of how tight it is. Going to be down to a number of swing states. We know the seven, but I'm not talking about these today. This is my first final prediction as we go into the final week before Election Day, and I'm going to be starting with my House predictions. So what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be going through the 30 top battleground House seats, and I'm going to be characterizing them either Democrat or Republican. Not going to be doing leans, not going to be doing likelies, because simply I do not want this video to last for an hour. I'm also going to be doing a quick look at the competitive governor races, but there's realistically only two, and considering the developments of one of those governor races, one of them's not even competitive anymore. There's only one genuinely competitive governor's race, but that'll be at the end of the video, very quickly done. But just to give you an example of the House as it stands: 220 Republican seats to 213 Democrat seats. One vacancy, I believe, in northeast Wisconsin. Guy retired. But of course, you need 218 for House control. Republicans have one of the slimmest, if not the slimmest, Republican control of the House in recent, if not the entirety of US history. Democrats only need to flip a handful of seats, and that's why it is so incredibly close. And of course, whoever does become president is going to have to rely on the House to get a lot of their agenda through. So I'm going to quickly go into the map that we're going to be filling in. I'm going to be going from east up in Maine's 2nd Congressional District, all the way down to the southwest. Of course, Alaska is a bit further north and to the west of the continental US, but in this map, we're going to be finishing off with Alaska, and I'm going to be filling in all these toss-ups districts. Now, some of them aren't actually that toss-up, some of them do actually lean a bit. I'm using, by and large, the Cook Political Report, pretty much using all these toss-up seats that they have here. I'm going to be going through them individually, giving a little explanation to some, and then just characterizing it. So bear with me, but I'm going to be doing this properly, and we're going to be starting with one of the most competitive House races in the entire 2024 cycle. Gerald Golden, Maine's 2nd Congressional District. Of course, you may well know it as being the district that always votes for Trump. It has done since 2016, did so in 2020, even when Donald Trump lost nationwide. And Jared Golden has always somehow managed to hold on. Again, Trump wins this by just about 10 points, sometimes a little less, sometimes a little more. Jared Golden always just about holds on. However, I think this is the election where Donald Trump is going to do pretty well in Maine's 2nd Congressional District, and I think it's actually going to put Maine into a likely column as a whole. And I think the Republicans going to pick this up in Maine's 2nd Congressional District. Now we're going over to one of the most important areas in the entire country this cycle, the Northeast, specifically New York, first of all. There's 3 congressional races I want to keep open at the moment. However, New York 22 is already characterized as a pickup for the Dems. And Tom Suozzi, of course, picked up New York's 3rd Congressional District following the retirement of disgraced former Representative George Santos. Now, what we're going to be doing here is I'm going to be going into New York 19th. That is a pickup for the Dems. And so is New York's 4th, Anthony D'Esposito. He's going to lose his race there. But I do think Michael Lawler is going to hold on to the 17th Congressional District. Now, this is the New York's 19th, sorry. Riley's going up against the incumbent Molinaro. I just think the polling is, pretty consistent, especially that Survey USA poll. That's just outside the margin of error. And that's exactly where the Democrats want to be. I think the Democrats did historically bad in New York, and I think they're going to struggle again, which is one of the reasons I think they're not going to be winning. The 17th, I think the Democratic challenger there is not the strongest of candidates, but the Democrats are going to pick up 2 of the seats, actually 3 of the seats that they did lose in 2022. Now, moving down to Pennsylvania, Of course, this is one of the most contentious presidential races. However, I think the Dems are going to clean sweep the competitive races here. That includes the ones that they already hold and are always competitive. Susan Wild in the 7th, and then Matt Cartwright in the 8th. These are always competitive, but the Democrats always manage to hold on to these. And this is one of the big shockers of the entire race. One of the most conservative ex-Freedom Caucus leader, Scott Perry, in and around Centre County. I think he's finally going to lose. I think there's a really, really good Democratic challenger in this race. The polling has shown that what realistically he does tend to win by about 5, maybe 10 points. He is really down in the polling. He's losing by, close to double digits in some of it, and I think he's going to narrowly lose this race. I think the polling is overestimating the Democrats slightly, but this is going to be a big loss to Republicans in their attempts to hold on for the House as a whole. Now, moving down to Virginia, we have Virginia 7th. Spanberger's obviously running in the Virginia governor race next year. That is why she is retiring her seat there. And also Virginia 2nd, this is a lead Republican seat, and I think this is going to stay Republican. However, I think the Democrats are going to hold on to Virginia 7th, and I think it's going to be a good sign for the whole. I think Virginia is going to be won by about 8, maybe 9 points at the presidential level, and this is part of this. This is on the border of the Nova region in Northern Virginia, and it's going to be very close. I was actually there earlier in the summer, so I had some experience on the ground, and it doesn't look like it's trending in the favor of the Republicans enough that they would be able to win this open seat. Now, I want to move quickly down here to the only competitive race in North Carolina. Again, North Carolina has been gerrymandered. Once again, as like so many other states, Illinois stands out as a big gerrymander as well. But this is the only competitive congressional district in North Carolina, and I think the Democrats are going to narrowly hold on to this, just because I think North Carolina is going to be extremely close. I think I don't want to get into my predictions yet, but I think Kamala Harris is narrowly going to lose North Carolina, narrowly, and if she does win, then North Carolina's first definitely goes blue. If not, it's going to be very close, but I think North Carolina's first, and Don Davis gets to be re-elected to his second term. Now we're going to quickly move up back to the Midwest, and we have 2 really, really competitive seats, both open, in Michigan's 8th and Michigan's 7th. Now, I think there's actually going to be a split here. I think Michigan's 7th is going to go Republican. Sorry, the other way around. And then Michigan's 8th is going to stay in the Democratic column. Alyssa Slotkin, Michigan's 7th, she is, of course, the Democrat Senate candidate in the Senate-wide campaign in Michigan. And Dan Kildee is not running for re-election in 2024. And realistically, this is just based on some of the polling I've seen. The polling in Michigan's 7th looks a lot more. This is actually Michigan's 8th. This one that I say is going into the Democratic column. This is as close as you are going to get to a statistical tie. The Democrat candidate actually has Jung leading in their internal poll. The Republicans have the exact same lead, but with way more smaller margins. And this was done maybe 2 weeks ago. So a lot can change. And I think Michigan as a whole is one of the more solid Democratic seats, Democratic presidential states, if there is any solid ones. But I do think the margins do favor the Republicans a lot more in Michigan's 7th than Michigan's 8th, and that's why there's going to be a split. Now, my first big call of this map is Wisconsin's 3rd. This is characterized as a likely Republican hold. However, I think the Democrats are going to pick this up, and it's going to be a really key seat that they pick up if they want to win back House majority. Now, Van Orden has been ever since being elected in the 2022 congressional cycle, he has been outspoken for a lot of controversial things he said. And I just think this is one of the big areas that tends to flip. Eau Claire is, of course, the biggest city in this area in the driftless region of Wisconsin. It's always a bellwether area. It's always a bellwether region. And I do think Van Orden has just been that too far to the right. And, there's some polling that backs it up. The DCCC have done an internal poll at the start of October. Cook, the challenger, is narrowly beating him. But of course, there's internal Republican polls saying that Van Orden is just outside the margin of error. I think it's going to be dead close, but I wouldn't be surprised. This is a unlikely pickup for the Democrats. However, in Iowa, I would love to wait for the Seltzer poll. This is, of course, like the big Iowa poll that comes out usually on the final weekend before the election, and I think it's going to be really interesting to see what that says. But at the moment, the vibes are that the two really competitive Iowa districts, where that be Iowa's third and Iowa's first, I think they are just about going to hold on, and I think Iowa's third is going to be really, really close. I'd really like to get to know and see what the Iowa Seltzer poll says about these races, but of course I have to make a few videos in the lead up to the election and have everything out by Monday, so that actually might change. I might want to put that into the Democrats column, but at the moment I think Zach Nine is going to narrowly hold on. And just if you want to see, this is the Iowa's third congressional polling at the moment, two internal campaigns and one that is actually associated with the Democrats. But it does have him leading. Again, there's not been a poll in over a month here, so that's why I want to wait for the Seltzer poll. Now, I'm going to be moving just over to the border. Nebraska second. I remember in 2022, this is a big deciding thing. John Bacon narrowly held on, but just because of the trends in the presidential race, there's polling coming out that Kamala Harris is going to be winning Nebraska second by double digits, and I think it's going to reach the double-digit margin. Of course, you have Dan Osborne in the race for Senate, and that is an extremely, extremely competitive race that no one thought was going to happen. I think John Bacon does not survive this. A lot of the polls that are coming out seeing him down outside the margin of error, and that's exactly what he doesn't want to see, and I think that's going to be a big pickup for the Democrats. So moving on, we're going to be moving on to the suburbs of Colorado. I think this is the Boulder region, if I'm not mistaken. Democrats are trying to hold on to Colorado's 8th. Colorado's third isn't actually that competitive. It was just because Lauren Boebert is a awful candidate, especially in a place like Colorado. But Colorado's 8th, I think the Democrats are going to hold on to this fairly narrowly. New Mexico's second is one that I highlighted in my previous video, is going to be one that need to watch out for. If the Democrats have a bad night, this is where they're going to be losing. If the worst case scenarios of the polling related to Latinos, shifting under the 55% mark for Harris, if that actually holds, then we could see this as a big, big loss for the Democrats. But I just don't think that we're going to be seeing shifts of that magnitude. I think we're going to be shifts, and I think Donald Trump and Republicans in general are going to be doing really well with Latinos, better than they have ever done before, arguably. But I don't think it's going to be enough to defeat Gabriel Vasquez in New Mexico second. Now, that moves us over to Arizona. Now, there's actually three that I wanted to put in here. The two main ones are Arizona's first and Arizona's sixth. However, Arizona's second is really interesting. You may know that the biggest Native American reservation, the Navajo Nation, is pretty much this entire square near the Four Corners point in the northeast of the state, and the elected tribal leader, is the Democratic nominee challenging Eli Crane. Therefore, I think this is going to be close. I still think Eli Crane wins it, but this is actually a election that is going to be a lot closer than some people have thought, and we have seen some polling come out of there that shows that Eli Crane could be in trouble in a seat where realistically he should be winning by a fairly big margin. I also think that the longtime Democratic target, David Schweikart, is going to hold on to his Arizona first congressional seat. However, Juan Ciscomani, in 2022, the Democrat retired, and he picked up the open seat. But I do think this is actually going to be an area that, a surprising flip. This is going to be very tight. Ciscomani could easily win this, but just from the vibes of Southern Arizona at the moment, it does actually look like the Democrats might be doing a little better here than I think they may be. Again, I think their chances at the presidential level is very tight, but I think Ruben Gallego running in the Senate against an unpopular challenger, that being Carrie Lake, is definitely going to help the Democrats' challenge here in Arizona 6th. But I would not be surprised if Ciscomani does narrowly hold on. Another one of those areas that I think is going to be really, really close come election day. Now I'm going to move on to one of the most competitive districts in the entire country. Washington's third, Marie Gluesenkamp-Perez against Joe Kent, rematch of 2022. It was one of the narrowest ones in the 2022 cycle, but the Democrat Marie Perez managed to narrowly beat the Republican who actually unseated the Republican who was here in a primary, mainly based off the fact that they voted to impeach Donald Trump in the second impeachment inquiry. Now, I think this is the one where Joe Kent does narrowly manage to win. But if this happens, you may have seen in the news the other day that there was a arson attack in a city, Vancouver, Washington, which is literally just the other side of Portland, Oregon, on the Washington side of the Columbia River here. Now, that's going to be really interesting to see how that affects, because there's probably about a few hundred votes in that. Now, I think there are ways that they can track some of the votes, but if the election does come down to a few hundred votes, which it really, really could, then there's going to be a lot of legal cases going on, and the Marie Perez campaign is going to be, fighting with every single thing they possibly have to get a redo of the election, similar to what happened in North Carolina in 2018. Search that up if you want to, have a better idea of what happens if that election is really, really close. Now, Oregon's fifth is actually a surprising flip for the Republicans back in 2022. I actually think the Democrats are going to flip this one, but again, these two seats are extremely, extremely tight, pretty much toss-ups. I'm happy to put it like this at the moment, but again, if you want to see what's happening on election night, those two are going to be extremely close. And then we move down into California. Now, there's actually been quite a few competitive races in California over the years, one of the least gerrymandered states in the entire US. And therefore, there's so many competitive states in a state that, as a whole is extremely democratic. Now, the Republicans hold all these seats at the moment. However, I do think they're going to be losing some, particularly in the Central Valley area. I think John Duarte is going to lose. I think David Valadao is going to lose. And I do think Mike Garcia is going to lose. Mike Garcia was actually the first video I ever made in this channel. I believe it was Chrissy Smith who was challenging him in a special election in 2020. But this is extremely tight sort of stuff. He has now managed to win 2020, the 2020 special, 2020 proper election, also 2022. But I do think this is the time that Democrats are going to massively improve in the Central Valley region. However, I think in the SoCal suburbs, of course, the Orange County one, where Michelle Steele is running against David Tran, I think she's now going to hold on, and Ken Calvert as well. I do have some polling numbers just to back up some of the stuff. The University of SoCal did a poll, pretty good poll. They did a few areas in the Central Valley. Gray was pretty much statistical tie, but leading. White sides against Mike Garcia in California's 27th. Pardon me. There's again been a poll done there, 500 likely voters, which is a pretty decent congressional district polling size, sample size that is. And again, the 41st district, which I do think Calvert is going to win, again, is really, really close. That's just a fact. But I do think that the Democrats are going to do better in the Central Valley region and struggle a bit more in SoCal. And then that moves us down to the last race that we have to characterize, Alaska. And I'm going to be honest, this is a complete toss-up, especially, you may see actually all this polling, but it's all been sponsored by the NRCC and Nick Begich, the Republican challenger. And of course, the Democrats winning in 2022 in Alaska's at-large district was a massive shock. No one saw it coming. Of course, you had Sarah Palin, but particularly the way that they changed the voting massively helped the Democrats. And I think it's going to be the thing that's going to help Mary Peltola just about win. Though, then again, the way that Alaska does its entire voting mechanism is going to be so interesting to watch. And we're really not going to know the results of this for a few days after. Of course, the rural counties in Alaska take a while to come in. So probably I'd say maybe wait until about the weekend or Friday night that we're going to be knowing the results in this race. So it could actually be down to this entire race on who controls the House. So really important one to watch, but I'm happy to put it in a Mary Peltola hold for the moment. But again, it's going to be so interesting just to see how people put their second and third choice votes in the ranked choice voting system that they have there. And that's going to pretty much fill out the entire map on 270 to win. Now, I've pretty much characterized 30 of the most competitive states here, and I've thrown in some extra ones that I think could flip, that the Cook Political Report doesn't put in a pure toss-up category. And what do we get? We get the Democrats winning the House, 221 seats, to the Republicans, 214. That's about a flip of 9 or so in favor of the Democrats, and they have a majority of 3, which is completely nothing. And there's a lot of very conservative, very blue dog Democrats in this, specifically Wisconsin's third, if you're talking about areas where you're going to have a really conservative Democrat. So it's going to be hard to get something done. And then, of course, if Trump wins, that does derail a lot of his plans, because a lot of his plans would have to go through the House as well. But yeah, I think the House is going to be extremely close. And I've already highlighted at least three that I said: up in the Northwest, up in the Southwest, and then up in Wisconsin, that I just think are going to be so tight. And this could go pretty much swing maybe 5 points towards the Republicans, and maybe the Democrats could win an extra 2 or 3 than this. But I think the average is a good, very, very narrow margin for the Democrats, and that is why they're favored to win the House, in my opinion. Now, I'm going to quickly go into the governor's races. There's not much to look at here because pretty much all these states, pardon me, Washington, should be a Democratic safe governor race, but we've not really seen much out of all of these governor's races. Missouri is probably going to be likely, along with Indiana, even though Mike Braun, the current Indiana senator who's running for the governor's race, is a pretty controversial figure, to say the least. In Indiana, which is now a ruby red state, in October, I don't really, the problem is we do have some pretty poor polling. A 23-day polling period with only 400 likely voters in the entire state. It's not the best polls to get that result from, but I do think it's going to be in a likely margin of victory, probably just over 11, maybe 12 points in favor of Mike Braun. But the two that we really want to look into is North Carolina. Now, people are saying North Carolina to be fairly competitive maybe a few months ago, but Mark Robinson is just an awful candidate. Factually, there's tons of videos of reporters going to Trump rallies, being super excited to vote for Trump, and then they mention Mark Robinson at the governor level, and all of a sudden that enthusiasm disappears. He's behind in every poll by at least double digits. The best poll I've ever seen for him that was taken in the last month was him only down 8 points. So he is completely out of the race and has no chance of winning. I still think the poll's going to be a little closer than they have been, but I think it's going to be a likely margin of victory for Josh Stein in the North Carolina governor's race. And the only real competitive one now is New Hampshire. Now, Kelly Ayotte is actually running for the Republican ticket here. Let me quickly go on to the polling. And she has actually done pretty well in the polling. The only one that had her behind was the Dartmouth poll. And if you can't tell from this, the Dartmouth poll had Harris up by 20 points in New Hampshire, which obviously is going to happen. I think this is a big outlier, and I think Kelly Ayotte is going to narrowly win. I think it's going to be by about a lean margin, maybe 2-3 points. If people don't know who she is, she was the ex-senator there. She lost to, I think it was Maggie Hassan. It could be the other one, Jean Shaheen. I cannot remember at this point. It was a while ago now, but I think she will pick up, of course, the incumbent. Chris Sununu is a really popular Republican incumbent in New Hampshire, as New Hampshire has pretty much leaned to the left for a number of years now. But yeah, so that's the governor races. I think the Republicans are going to pretty much, everything's really going to hold here. Of course, Roy Cooper is already an incumbent Democratic governor. He is term limited. He'll probably run for the 2026 North Carolina Senate seat. That's going to be a great race to watch. But that's what I'm having to give you for my first final prediction of the 2024 election cycle. Democrats to narrowly win the House, with some really, really competitive seats that everyone should be watching on election day. Could go either way. And then pretty much the governor races to stay as they have been. So thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe. And I'll see you all again very soon for my next final prediction.